That's what's so genius about you. You can read an article in the morning and have 10 minutes on it when you hit the stage. That's unbelievable to me.
Well, thank you. And it's fun. My favorite joke's always my newest. They say you don't make fun of the left. It's like, yeah, I do. You just don't hear it. You're so angry that you don't hear anything except what you want to hear.
The skills that you have outside of comedy, what is the one that you're so glad that you have?
I think my ability to work with tools, like modern cars, you can't fix anything on them, right? I always say you lift the hood on a new car, it should just say none of your business.
What is the best piece of advice you got from any comedian?
Funny you should ask. This guy told me, now I don't know if it's true, but he said, you know why they send cars to pick you up?
Why?
Ed McMahon. NBC was always worried about Ed McMahon getting caught drunk driving. So they started sending a car to pick him up, and then they realized if we send a car to pick you up and take you home, we got you all day. You can't go anywhere.
Wow.
This dude, he was a key grip on Power Rangers, matter of fact, and he'd been in the business, forever. And he said, anything you think is a benefit to you is a benefit to them. He said, anything you think they're giving you, no, they're saving money somehow. Because he said back in the day, these were the old stars. You know how that Rat Pack in that world was? They would just walk off. We going to the bar.
Well, it makes sense now because I was thinking, it's cool they send you a car for a red carpet, but they want you there on time, so then they don't have to wait for you to start the movie to hold all these people. It makes sense now, even on set. We're going to send you a car to bring you to set.
Yep.
Yeah, because they want you to get there on time.
Right, and now you can't go nowhere. You want to have lunch? Oh, you'll be on the lot.
Yeah,
it's so true. I never even thought about that.
Yeah, he was. Those guys. If you talk to them, they were fun. I knew guys like in the 80s, they were like, cocaine was in the budget. Cocaine was like in candy dishes during production. That was, and you look back and you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. That all of them talk about how they partied, I was
listening to a podcast about Studio 54, and the reason why they get busted is because the dude walked in when they were busting the place. He had the books in there, and they wrote off literally cocaine. They had a cocaine budget that was in the books. How the cookbooks was like, we spend this much on cocaine, and they were documenting how, because they would just give it out at that time.
Right. Yeah. It was, definitely different time. And it's funny because when I look back, it's like, okay, would that have been more fun or would I have died?
True statement. True statement.
People who come from a working background before they get into Hollywood, I feel like that's where you want to be a little bit later in your career because you have that base and like my family owns a construction company and I grew up every summer, no matter what, from the age of 11 until I was 18 when they finally just said, you suck at this, go find something else to do. We'd work so hard. So when I got into radio and I would, hey man, we got 12 30-second ads we have to cut, and everybody would complain. I go, we're not hauling shingles up ladders because we're talking into a microphone and they're paying us extra to do it on top of our salary. Yeah. Why are we complaining?
Well, it's like the woman who becomes hot in her 20s versus the one who's been hot all her life.
Yeah, you're right.
Because the one who's hot in her 20s or whatever, she's grounded, whereas the one who's been hot all her life, like she thinks everyone is that nice.
Yeah.
Somebody said that. Somebody said that's the problem with beautiful people. They think everyone's nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. It's so true.
I got suspended for a day on my old radio show because one of my co-hosts said, my sister got a flat tire and nobody would stop to help her. And I said, because she's not pretty. And I hate to say it, but it's true. If she was a 10, every guy would have been lined 100%. Up down the block to be able to help her. That's
because guys are just physical.
That's exactly, yes.
That's how.
Only reason that wouldn't happen now is guys don't know how to fix a flat tire.
That's true.
They'd have lined up to call AAA for her.
Yeah.
What You're talking about me right there. Yeah. I don't know how to fix nothing.
Yeah. What is, of all the skills that you have outside of comedy, what is the one that you're so glad that you have?
Well, I can work with tools. I know, like modern cars, you can't fix anything on them, right? I always say you lift the hood on a new car, it should just say none of your business, right? 'Cause the tech has reached the level. But I think my ability to work with tools to look at something and say, oh, this is how that goes together. Now, a lot of times I won't do it. I'll pay someone to do it because they're going to do it better and faster. But the fact that I know how, I think that is the thing I'm happy about.
So 80s aerospace, you're doing airplanes and things like that. When did you switch over to comedy? When was comedy? When that change happened?
Funny you should ask, because this is just becoming part of my act, right?
Okay.
You know my act's like, well, you didn't know me, but when I first started, I was kind of a storyteller, kind of personal. During Last Comic is when I got into Topical, and I loved it. And I just became a total Topical guy. And
I respect Topical so much because for me, story about family, very easy to do. It's hard for me to read something. Like, that's what's so genius about you. And I've seen you at shows. Mm-hmm. There's an article, and you can read an article in the morning and have 10 minutes on it when you hit the stage. That's unbelievable to me.
Well, thank you. And it's fun. But now I'm trying to get back into personal, like the thing young comics are doing, and you've always been a great storyteller, but your family is unique.
It is. It was very easy for me. Yes.
It's you and Mal Hall.
Yep. That's it. That's it. We're the two.
There's only two of you.
There's only two. If you don't hear it from us, you're not going to hear it.
So it's very interesting, but a lot of young comics now, this is the way I describe it. They're doing a therapy session on stage. I like the ones who make it funny. There are some who do it and it's like, well, you're just telling me what's going on in your head, but make it funny. Do the work to make it funny. And that interests me. I like that.
Do you feel...
oh, man, sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
How
no worries.
unprofessional I am.
No, it's just so unprofessional.
I am.
I know, you disrespecting my Asian side. I get it.
Okay.
Somebody needs you to fix their car.
Yeah, right? We need some guy that knows how to work tools. It's LinkedIn.
No, man, this is actually good news.
Okay. What'd you get?
My friend in Brentwood still has a house.
Oh, nice.
Oh, good.
That's great. That's great. If you don't know, because this podcast will probably come out later, we are we are not. We live in Vegas, but the fires are going on in the Palisades and things like that. And now I heard it's even reached Pasadena. So I know this is after the fact, but hopefully everybody's safe. We love everybody, and it's crazy to see people we know going through this.
It's insane. Like, people who had a house yesterday,
it's gone.
Yeah.
Don't have anything today. Like, completely burned to the ground. It's mind-boggling.
Can I tell you what's even sadder? When some people try to make it political.
Yeah,
and that's the sad. Everything politics gets dragged into everything.
We're not going to nonsense. Okay, we're not going to go into that.
No, I know.
And this is what I'm talking about, the topical stuff, right? So as I was saying, and I'm going to get to the answer to your question in a minute, but I like that personal, like, deeper stuff that people are doing. The political thing, the topical thing, I got tired, man, because it's the same thing over and over. We're not progressing as a society.
But is it because you mainly dealt with politics and
politics and social issues?
Yeah, but there are other news items to cover besides that.
And I used to talk some more about them when I was doing my podcast. I used to talk more about other, like, my podcast started, it was called Who's Paying Attention, and it was the stories that led to jokes, like the things in the news. So some of them would be the serious topics, but some of them be them offbeat, weird, crazy. I read one today. Couple goes to a swinger party in the neighborhood. Wife hooks up with a guy. Gets mad at the husband the next day when she's sober because she said he pushed her into it. Now, I've seen your videos, and I know there's situations where you say as a husband you can't win. No, he can't win.
He can't win. There's no way.
He can't win. Your wife gets drunk, hooks up with a guy, wakes up the next day and blames
it's your fault. Yeah,
it's like hitting a guy when they dream about something bad. Like, did you do that?
Yeah.
No, man. It's. Let me tell you what I love about Alonzo. He came and did one of my Hot Mess shows here at Jimmy Kimmel's. And he stayed for my set, and then he had great notes. He was like, you should think about this, and this.
I love the art, man.
Yes, and that's what I love. You love the art, but you also love spreading knowledge.
Yeah.
And that's the best thing about you.
Yeah.
You know,
I got that from George. George Wallace was that
he's great. Yeah.
You know? So in answer to your question, the transition from aircraft to comedy, You know, I had a drug problem in the 80s. I talk about that. I was on the cocaine timeline.
Okay.
Started in 1980 when it was fun, ended in 88 when it was crack. You know, I was part of the crack epidemic.
Yeah.
As I tell them, you know, what's crack? Crack epidemic was the opioid epidemic without the sympathy.
Yes, 100%.
Oh, wow. That's accurate. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went to rehab, and I went to a place called Studio 12. So the stars went to Betty Ford. The crew went to Studio 12. I went to rehab with the grips, the electricians, the truck drivers, the makeup artists, and all that. And I've always been funny. I could always make people laugh. They were the ones who made it real that I could go into this, right? So I was working, I had got back into aerospace, and I was training new workers, and I had fun making them laugh, because what I didn't know is I had no fear of public speaking, which a lot of people do. When I started teaching, I just went up there and started talking. To me,
Yeah.
it was, you know, second nature. It was no big deal. So you put those things together, and I was like, man, I want to do comedy. And these were the people who were encouraging, who were like, yeah, you could do it.
How old were
You
you?
could do it. I was 30.
30.
Had a late
Okay.
start.
See, I did too.
You know?
I started at 34.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's weird when you start at that age. What's good and bad is for me, I never had like a crew to come up with.
Right.
Because, you know, they all start at 18 and then they went through the open mics and progressed together. When you start later in life, it's kind of like, here I am. Let's see how this works out. But I do feel we have more to talk about at that age too.
You have, yeah. And you have a different perspective because you've lived some,
Yeah.
you know. But the funny thing about that is, yeah, I was friends with like a lot of them coming up. Like I saw them start and stuff like that, or I started with them. You know, I remember me and Fluffy used to, you know, I remember when he bounced onto the scene.
Yeah.
He literally, we're doing these clubs, these bars and casinos in East LA, you know, $50 working for a meal, whatever. And I always describe this, this giant 10-year-old bounced onto the stage in a Hawaiian shirt giggling. And that was it. The audience fell in love. We were like, oh yeah, this is done. Like there's a few people you could see it right from the start. He was one. Now, I didn't know he was a marketing genius.
Oh, yeah.
You know, if you're listening, Fluffy, you could have shared that knowledge. I could have made a few dollars. No, but I think that was the thing, getting to see that. The other thing is, I always say I started in LA because I didn't know I wasn't supposed to.
Yeah.
So the great thing about that is I was around the heavy hitters from the start. Like, you have to be on your game. You have to be better.
Was it cutthroat? Because what I feel right now is it's not because so many people, you need comics to have podcasts.
Yeah.
It's more of a community. But when I started 13 years ago, I know you've been in a lot longer than that. It seemed like a little bit more cutthroat. People would get upset.
I'm not going to say cutthroat. I'm going to say competitive.
Okay.
And I'll say the big difference, because when I went to New York the first time, I was amazed at how supportive the comics were of each other.
Yes.
The New York comics were like, I ran into the crew that was like Keith Robinson and Talent and those guys. And they were all like, I was there to do a show. They said, oh man, you here to do a show? Yeah, we're going to take you here. You're going to run your set. You're going to do this and that. They were all just really cool, you know, right from the start. Patrice, I met Patrice back then and that whole crew. And the LA crew wasn't as tight. Like, we knew each other, but we didn't really hang. Some of them did, but it was more, you know, and this is also in the 90s, it was all about getting a TV show, right?
Yeah.
Everybody in LA wanted a sitcom. That was the goal.
And the producers are actually in the shows, watching the shows.
Yeah.
And or you would go to, what's it called, Just for Laughs at that time.
That was my thing. That's why, JFL made me a comic. I was one of those guys. I went to JFL.
A new face?
I went to New Faces in 97, right? This is pre-internet when few people knew who I were, but most of them didn't know who we were. And they put us in a separate hotel, right? And they tried to keep us secret. And then you do the New Faces show, and all the industry came to the New Faces. It was a whole thing to see who the New Faces are. I did it with KP Anderson, who's become a big-time producer, Laurie Kilmartin, Willie Barceno was on my year, a few others that I don't necessarily remember, but I'll always remember when I became a comic, right? So I had this joke. I said, I don't like golf. I don't like hockey, right? So it's Canada. Boo! I'm like, shut up. Shut the fuck up. I don't like hockey because the only thing black is the puck. And every time I look, they're hitting it with a stick. Now, golf, on the other hand, right? So,
yeah.
So you do the 7 minutes. Dom Herrera was a host. Dom was great. My manager came running down the stairs. He said, "You are about to make a ton of fucking money." And the key word is ton of fucking. Because when a comic at New Faces told the audience to shut up, every industry person looked down and said, "Who is that?" And Michael, it literally, they were bidding the next morning. Like the next day I was getting offers. William Morris came out of nowhere. It was so funny. I couldn't turn around without a William Morris agent being there. "Oh, you need coffee? Are you hungry right now?" It was hilarious. But this is how they did it back then, right? They courted you. And two guys who were always, I'll always tell people how cool they were. Titus came up to me. He said, "Hey, man, this was me 2 years ago. This is what's going to happen. This is where you're at. This is what they're going to do. This is what's going to happen. Blah, 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 blah," right? Very cool.
By the way, not to cut you off, but Titus is always spreading knowledge.
Yeah.
Even on my
He's
first
brilliant.
special 7 years ago, he told me back then, "You need to own it." Like, he's the dude that's always telling people to do. Okay, but go ahead.
Titus, and the
Big
other
shout
one,
out to Titus.
Rogan.
Really?
Joe Rogan and Kevin James. And this is when Joe had just finished News Radio. He was between News Radio and Fear Factor, and Kevin had just got his show. And Joe, I knew Joe from the Laugh Factory, and they're literally getting in a cab, and he's like, "Hey, come on." And I went and did spots with them. Went around Montreal doing spots, and it's like they're TV stars now. I'm just becoming a comic, right? I'm 5 years in, and they, so I always say, like, I joke with Joe. It's like, "Man, Joe, I love you. It is hard to be your friend." Because every 6 months he's the worst person in the world, right?
Yeah.
And then he's cool, but he's always been cool with me, always been the same with me. So, but that's the way it was back then doing Montreal, and that changed around 2000, 2001. But yeah, it used to be you go to Montreal wanting a deal, and I was one of the lucky ones who got a deal, and literally quit my day job, and
So when you say you got a deal, what's that mean? You got signed by an agent, or you got cash?
No, I signed with an agent, and then they got me a development deal with a production company, and that's when I got cash.
How much did you get?
$200.
Dollars.
Yeah, $200. But I needed it or not.
He quit his job. He's like, "I'm out of here.
I'm
out of here."
No, man,
Because that's a lot of spots in an open mic.
it wasn't the money; it was being a comic,
And it was being accepted into that world.
I mean, Dom, because I had been working as a doorman at the Laugh Factory. I was a doorman at the factory 93, 94. And Dom said to me, he said, "Damn, doorman is funnier than I thought, And I will never forget, I was in front of the Improv. This is a few weeks after, right? Keenan brought me, that's when Keenan had a talk show.
Yep.
So he signed me to do his talk show up there. So that was my first late night spot. But I was in front of the Improv, and I'm talking with Chappelle and Dane about comedy. And it was literally an out-of-body experience. Like, I'm looking down on myself saying, "What the fuck are you doing talking to Damon Wayans and Dave Chappelle?" Like, that was insane. But that's what happened, That's 100%. What happens with comedy. That's when you're in the fraternity, when you don't have to introduce yourself anymore. I would never want, "I'm a comic," They just knew, like, "Yeah, you're a comic."
It's pretty interesting that, I was lucky enough to be invited to this Netflix thing. And they took this year picture, all the greats in it. But what was crazy is walking around there, the support in that place.
Yeah.
At that time. I don't know how it is outside because I don't really know these people. But in there, everybody at least acted like they knew each other, and everybody was super supportive and nice and complimentary. And I was like, "Oh, this is crazy." Where it's kind of like the out of body. You're like, there's Dave, there's Kevin, there's Cat. Cat Williams came up to me and I go, "Oh, hey, Michael Yo." He goes, "I know you, Michael Yo." And I've never met him in his life.
That's funny. I don't know Cat. I've never met Cat.
But I guarantee he knows who you are. Because Cat is, believe it or not, he's very in tune with the comedy. He knows comedians and things you don't think. But I was shocked. He goes, "I know you, Michael Yo." And I was like, why?
Wow.
So it's a very cool moment. I've never had that. I had a slight moment with Dave Chappelle, but like not a full conversation. Now, was Dave Chappelle at that time?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
he was.
Dave.
Okay.
So I first met Dave. So I did this comedy writing class. This is how I started. It was in Santa Monica. I can't remember the name of the theater. It's not there anymore. But Comedy Central used to do a show there called The A-List.
Yep.
Right, and it was like there'd be two comics. They'd each do 30 minutes. This is back when Comedy Central did stand-up.
Yep.
Yeah, look it up, kids. It actually used to, they used to, have
Used to be
stand-up.
big.
Wasn't just reruns of The Office,
Right.
Yeah.
So Dave was there to record one, and it was just randomly. And I was there during the day, and we started talking, and he's always been cool with me since. Like it was like just a weird way to meet him, but he's always been cool. And I know Dave, and like it's not like I pick up the phone and call him, and it's not that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But whenever we see each other, we're cool. We talk. We'll laugh about something. He's a motorcycle guy. I'm a motorcycle guy. We talk bikes or whatever. But he has always been so cool. Dave, he's aware of who he is without ego. That's the way I would describe Dave. He's aware of who he is, but there's no ego trip attached to it. He doesn't talk down to anybody.
No, he doesn't.
He just doesn't want to be bothered with the, oh my God, you're a star, this or that. Like he's not that vibe. He knows who he is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's actually a cool place to be. And I think when you're amongst them, like you were talking about, there's nothing to prove, right?
No.
It's like we all know who we are. We're and I always say the thing with comedy is, it's not how much money you make. It's not how big your name is. Are you funny? When you're hanging out in the green room, are you funny? Like, this guy got $50 million and this guy got, $100 or whatever. They don't care. Are you funny? If you're funny, it's cool. And the ones who have made it will give advice to the ones who haven't, I think. But, you come in there trying to be the funniest guy in the green room, your ass is out.
Yeah.
Hey guys, Dr. Phil. I'm in the makeup chair or the haircut chair. I know I've got none on top, but I got quite a bit between the legs. TMI, HPV, HBO. Michael Yo is a good friend of mine. He's Asian, he's black, and it's good to have a friend with two different ethnicities going on. But he's also funny. He's not just a guy that with an ambiguous face. He's also got a heart that beats inside of him and a wiener between his legs that's full of blood and also passion. So what I mean by that is his comedy special, Snack Daddy, comes out. Okay, somebody just burned a Pop-Tart on an ironing board, but that's not about them. It's about Michael Yo. MichaelYo.com is the website to go to watch his special, Snack Daddy, which comes out January 28th. And depending on when you're watching this promo, the video could be out already. So if you haven't watched the special, watch it, put it in the queue, put the kids in the closet, and shave your head, your back, your pussy, and your crack. We'll be right back. Snack Daddy.
So do you feel like you made it?
That's a great question. Depends on when you ask me. Depends on when you ask me. Most of the time, yeah. Listen, George Wallace, who's the greatest, most positive guy, said, never forget, we got the greatest job in the world. I get paid to lie. Right? That's his joke. I get paid I tell lies. We at the end of the day, man, we get paid to talk shit. That ain't bad.
No.
There's people with jobs, and like you said, coming from the real world, I know what it's like to have a job, right? When I was doing radio, I know you had the E-gig and you've done, Sirius and this and that. You do. When I did talk radio for Tavis Smiley for a while, and I was like, yo, man, this Monday to Friday shit.
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
And the
on
show lasts
Sunday,
and it lasts forever.
yeah, on Sunday, I was like, I dread Mondays. I'm not supposed to give a shit about Mondays. So when I left that show, I didn't mind going back to the freedom of being a stand-up. Now, if for the right money, you'll work Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
I wasn't making the money for it to be worth it. So, yeah, I mean, I've made it. Listen, man, I'm still living a good life. I bought a house. I got cars, motorcycles. I've experienced all of that. I've seen the world. I think that's the biggest thing that I never expected. I've seen the world. I've been everywhere in the world except South America. That blows my mind. So, yeah, but then I can see someone on TV and be like, shit.
Yeah.
I ain't shit. I have friends, I joke, but it's true. I have friends who make a week what I make a year.
We both have friends that make it in one night.
Right. So
one arena show.
Yeah. So that's when you're like, have I made it? Well, I haven't done a stadium. I was talking with Burr about that. That was,
and I asked Dean Del Rey, because I know y'all hung out the other day. I asked him, like, when do you start? Do you mind me asking how old you are?
No, 62.
62. I asked because I'm 50, but I'm fairly new to the game. 13 years. But I still have dreams of that stadium, and I go, Dean, do you still have dreams of, you filling up stadiums, theaters? He goes, I'm happy where I am, man. I'm getting to do comedy.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Different people have different paths.
No, listen, I would love to do it. I would love to do, the biggest show I've done now, I did warm up for the Brady roast. So that was, the forum was full, and that was super fun. And it was crazy. Jeff Ross called me. He said, hey, man, I got a gig for you. You interested? And he didn't. And I'm like, yeah, what is, and I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be a fundraiser in Bakersfield.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, yeah, we want you to warm up for the Tom Brady roast. I was like, yeah, I can make room in my schedule. And it was super fun, and they asked me to do another one that I couldn't do, the last roast they did, that year-end thing. Yeah, it's fun. But it's a lot of work to get there. It's easy to look at Kevin Hart and say, I want to be Kevin Hart. But when you see how much work it takes to be Kevin Hart, when you see how much work guys like Joe Coy, I remember when Joe was hosting at the Laugh Factory, being outside every night, handing out his card to every single person. And it's like, are you willing to do that work? Because that's the work it takes. Unless you strike it lucky, get a movie or something like that. I mean, I remember we were doing open mics when Jamie Kennedy came. We were at some open mic bar in Van Nuys. He was like, hey, man, I just got this movie called Scream. Literally, that's the way it was.
How it works.
That's the way it was. Yeah. And it was like, that started Jamie Kennedy. So unless you get, and when I say lucky, I'm not discounting anyone's talent. I'm just saying you get that break. George told me, he said, listen, man, everyone gets a break. The key is to be ready when your break comes.
Yes, 100%.
Right. So that's the way it was for me with Last Comic. And me and Hef joke about this all the time. We have tens of thousands of MySpace friends.
Yeah.
You're huge on MySpace, man.
He was killing it. Killing it.
Did you think you were ready for JFL?
Oh, yeah. I was ready for JFL and I was ready for Last Comic. When I was on Last Comic, and this is no disrespect because I was on the all-headliner season. We had killers on that show. But in my mind, it's like, man, this is a step. I want to be competing with Chris Rock and Chappelle. This is just a step up to that, So, but it was fun. It was great. It was a magnificent exposure. I've never been a good marketing guy. I've always been a performer. And the thing I tell young comics now, marketing is your job. Learn it.
It's a job.
And I didn't. So when you ask me, did I make it? Yeah. For someone who's never really promoted himself, I've made it pretty damn far, You get it. It's hard to maintain it. I'm filling clubs. I'm doing sold out weeks and stuff for a couple of years after Last Comic, but then it tapers off because I didn't have
the marketing,
and if I look back, one decision, and I never thought about it. So going into Last Comic, my manager, it was partnership. One of the partners left and the other one said, listen, man, I don't have time. I love you, but it's only 24 hours in a day. Right. I didn't ask Judy and I knew Judy, but it just wasn't on my mind.
Judy Gold, correct?
No, Judy Marmel.
Okay, sorry.
She's the one that
it wasn't on my mind to ask Judy.
Oh.
You know this as well as I do. If Judy was my manager and I won Last Comic Standing,
it's over.
I wouldn't even be talking to you right now. I'd be Michael, I'm busy.
I'll pass. Pass. No, I remember having a meeting with Judy. She wanted to sign me. And I was not just starting comedy, but I was trying to find a new manager. And the big rap at that time with Judy is like, if you get signed by Judy and I guess it was Levity or whatever it's called, and you have a falling out, you don't get booked at improvs. That's what the rumor, that was the rumor going around. So I go, I'm just coming up. I can't risk that.
Well, that was the case with like all the club owners were managers, like Jamie Masada was at,
Yeah.
Now, there's an example. Early, when I first started, Jamie asked to manage me, and some part of me was smart enough to say no.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the case with Judy. But the thing with Judy is Judy going to manage you? Because I later signed with Levity.
Yep.
But Judy makes stars. Judy puts her mind to it. She will make you a
You're
star.
talking about Burt Kreischer. You're talking about Sebastian. You're talking about Taylor Tomlinson. I mean,
Lonnie Love.
I mean, stars.
Yeah.
She knows how to do it.
But she has to say, okay, I'm going to do it. So again, if I'd had the last comic, she'd have done it. I believe she'd have done it.
Do you consider that your biggest mistake in your career?
No, I can't even say for sure it's a mistake as much as I didn't know.
Yeah.
So I had signed with Omnipop, and I always, because I was hanging out with Titus a lot.
Yep.
Me and Titus were actually working on something, and he was with Omnipop, and I signed with Omnipop. And I always said, Omnipop was like The Sopranos. Like, I was an earner, but they didn't get me to captain.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't, was it a mistake? I don't know that I could say it's a mistake, because my career, I never had an end point. It was always the next indicated thing. And Judy got me my first special. Judy came to me when I was with Omnipop and said, hey, we want to do a special with you. This is when Levity was producing them. And it was for Showtime. And then that's when I signed with Levity. I switched over. But, so...
Well, let me ask you this.
Say.
What is your biggest mistake? Is there one, like, just stands out? Like, if you could go back in time. Here we go. What is that?
I'll tell you a story that may or may not have been my biggest mistake. I was at the Laugh Factory, and this is in my first 3 or 4 years of comedy.
And Holly Berry walked in?
No. Ray Murphy, this brother, he's like, yeah, I'm Eddie Murphy's uncle, blah, blah, blah. And you know how you get them cards after shows. You're like, yeah, whatever. Come to find out, yeah, he was Eddie Murphy's uncle. Yeah, Ray was Eddie's. Yeah. That's
wow.
Who knows what might have happened, but, this was in 95 or whatever, so who knows. I always look at that one and say, wonder what would have happened if I'd have called Ray Murphy. I don't know. They're not mistakes. They're decisions. They're crossroads, Last Comic, their first season, I was one of the people they approached. They approached a ton of us, right? And they told us, you don't have to stand in line. We just want you to audition. So I did the first audition. I passed the first audition. And then I got offered Bringing Down the House. It was the first movie that I was in. And just so you know, Reddy, I have a long history of playing security guards. And I have protected the best in the biz. So in that one, I was protecting Steve Martin's backyard for Queen Latifah. Right?
Oh, very nice.
That's right. Yeah.
But my manager at the time, she said, "Oh, you got to take the movie. Screw this TV stuff. You got to take." And I did. I did the movie, and it was really fun. But who knows? Looking back, I think I could have won season 1.
And that was the one. Who won that season?
That was Dat Fan.
That's right. And he blew up for a long time.
Yeah.
Dat Fan, and I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but he was the first comedian to openly tell me he writes nothing. He said, I'm a performer and I hire writers. And I go, I thought you're not supposed to say that part out loud.
Wow.
But he didn't care.
He wasn't ready, though.
Yeah.
So this was the big thing that happened with Last Comic back then. So you had beasts on there. You had Ralphie May and Voss and, a few other guys. And then there was a lot of middles, because at that time you couldn't have done a special. You couldn't have done a Tonight Show. There were some things you couldn't have done to be on the show, right? And what they quickly found out was these comics weren't ready. They didn't have the material. Voss did, Ralphie did, but most of them weren't ready for that level. And Dat was doing the same act over and over. He was killing it. Like Jay Moore said, "Oh no, he beat them legitimately because they didn't take him seriously, and he came to play." So the following season 2, was when they said, "Okay, we'll take anyone," and that's when I was Kathleen Madigan, Gary Goldman, Todd Glass, Corey Holcomb, me, Heffron, Tammy Pescatelli. Like, everybody was a headliner except Ant. Ant was the only one who really wasn't a headliner at the time. Bonnie McFarlane. So suddenly the whole show took a jump, right? It was to another level. And, the funny thing, when they always had that, I know that I'm funnier, like you had the challenge, I know I'm funnier than, I would always hit Goldman. Goldman was like, "Man, why you keep throwing me under the bus?" I said, "Well, Gary, I can either pick you or Kathleen, the female comic of the year with 16 Tonight shows and 2 specials. Yeah, I'm going after you, Cookie boy. I'm going after you. I ain't challenging Kathleen. Nobody wanted that smoke.
Yeah.
You ain't challenging Kathleen Madigan. She was Kathleen Madigan then.
That's awesome, man. What you break into stand up, you won it, right? Last comic.
I won season 3. I'm the unknown winner.
The unknown winner, because why? What happened in that season?
So what happened? We did season 2. I was a runner-up to Heffron, and they came back and they said, we want to do a best of. We're going to take the 10 comics from season 1 and put them against 10 from season 2. We're not going to live together, because back then we used to live. We did the whole reality show.
Right.
Yeah.
They said, well, forget that. We're just doing head-to-head competitions, right? A lot of things went wrong. Fans didn't know what it was, because they were used to the summer reality show, and they're like, wait, what are you guys doing now? And they didn't publicize it or explain it well enough. I don't know what the deal was with NBC or this or that, but when we got to the final episode, they just canceled the show.
They didn't even show it.
They didn't show it. So it was me, Heffron. Who are the other
Did
two?
they tape it?
No, it was me, Heffron, Dave Mordell from Minnesota.
Oh, yeah.
And I forget who the 4th one was. It might have been Gary, but I'm not sure. Whoever, but anyway, it was 4 finalists. So we don't know who won. So we would always find out we'd always come back Monday and tape the show Tuesday, right? And by now we're all touring, because we had already done the show. So we're doing sold out shows on weekends, and then
And you
coming
saw
back
the
and
numbers
doing
just
this.
jump. It was
crazy.
Okay.
Crazy. My friend said, you know how I know you've been on TV? The parking lot's full.
Yep.
You know.
So real quick, you say you didn't know who won. Did they record individual celebrations for each of you?
No, it was we were supposed to find out. That Tuesday was supposed to be the reveal show.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay, so the voting is on the voting was on Wednesday, like the day after the show. Then the following week they reveal who won. So it's going back and forth. We're hearing rumors the show's canceled, this, that, the other, right? So Jay Moore was on like Good Morning Phoenix or something like that, and they're talking. He said, "Man, screw them. Alonzo Bodden won." And the look on your face is the look NBC had. Like, what? They immediately fired Jay. So I called them and I said, "Listen, did I win?" And they said, "We can't say one way or the other, because we still don't know if there's going to be a show." I said, "If I won and there's no show, do I still get the money?" They said, "Yeah, the winner still gets the money."
Okay.
Like, all right, I'm cool.
Yeah.
Did you get the money?
Yeah, I got the money. The thing was, and then they weren't going to do it. They had to tape a show, because Comedy Central would rerun the show on weekends.
Yep.
And Comedy Central was like, "Look, we got a hole in the schedule, so we need to." So it was a very anticlimactic half-hour show. Everyone already knew I won, and this, and it was nice.
How much did you get, if you don't mind?
$250.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it was, especially considering Heffron had gotten $50 for the season
He
before.
must have been so mad.
Oh yeah, I rubbed it in.
And they didn't even show it. You won $250, and they didn't even have to show it.
But that killed the show, because I think, see, the show used to get a lot of coverage. Back then, they had TV Guide, USA Today. They would review it every week, and they would predict who's going to get eliminated, this and that. Like, we were one of those reality shows.
It was like AGT of today.
Right,
Yep.
right. And when they did it like that, we said, the meat rats get more coverage than we do now. NBC killed it, I mean, I'm not knocking it. Listen, it was a great experience for me. I had a great run. I made friends. We're still friends to this day. Me and Corey became friends. Me and Corey were the 2 black guys on the show. And later on, KP, one of the producers, said, "Listen, we were only going to have 1 black comic on, but you 2 were so completely different."
That's great.
And I got nothing but love for Corey, and I think it's a mutual respect, even though we do comedy completely different.
Completely different.
But that was the other thing that it's better now. But black comics were pigeonholed, And one of the cool things I will say I get now as an old head, I get young black comics say to me, "Yeah, man, you were the first one I saw, didn't do the hood. You was main." And I was like, well, that's not my reality. You got to be real on stage. But I always appreciated that, the young comics who said, because with me, it was Franklin Ajayi. Franklin was brilliant. And when I met him, he's one of those that when he knew who I was flattered. Yeah.
Yeah. What is the best piece of advice you got from any comedian, big or small?
Tommy Davidson told me never think on stage. He said once you're on stage, either you know it or you don't. Don't think. Be in the moment.
Yeah, that's probably my biggest issue. Sometimes is I'm doing three things. I'm juggling what I sound like, what is coming out of my mouth, how is my posture, and instead I should just be like, how do you feel about this? Because if you're just feeling this, it's going to come out exactly the way that it's supposed to.
I know you've had this experience, and I don't know you as well. I know when you walk off stage, you killed, and you don't even remember what you said.
Yeah.
That means you were that much in the moment.
Yeah.
You know, you were totally in the moment. You don't even remember what you said. You're like, man, I don't even know.
No.
And I still love that. I love when there's a moment that you can't duplicate. You know, like somebody in the audience said something, or you just had a thought and you went with the thought or something, and it's like, yeah, that's just gonna work there that night.
Do you feel, and maybe I'm wrong in saying this, but do you feel comedy is coming back? Like, it was the TikTok, it was crowd work, and it still is kind of to a certain, but I feel TikTok people are falling off. People that just do crowd work, I think it's always good to do in a show, but the clips aren't getting as many views anymore. I feel like, this is my opinion, and maybe because I do comedy this way, people want to be a part of your life because of all the reality TV, because how the news is. Joe Coy gave me my best piece of advice starting out. He goes, you're like me, be a sitcom. Mm-hmm. So every year people come to see you to hear about the next, like your daughter was 3, now she's 4, now she's 5, now, and they follow you and they become part of your family.
Yeah, that is true. Definitely that's true. And there was a time when your act was a sitcom, right? You know, back in the 90s, comics were doing 5 minutes. That was their sitcom. And when you look at the Ray Romanos, the Tim Allens, the Roseanne before she completely lost her mind or whatever, that show was 100% based on their act.
Yep.
In the early 2000s, when alternative comedy was big, and everybody
I love how you smile when you say all comedy.
They had their music stand on stage, and they would read their notes and this and that. I was at some show with Rick Overton.
Yep.
Right? Again, you talk about masters. Look him up, kids. One of the masters of the art. And Rick looked at me and said, it always comes back to funny. Mm-hmm. So they can come up with whatever niche, whatever they want to call it. Because see, the thing about this was my problem with the alternative thing. The greatest alternative comics are comics. How is Patton Oswalt not a comic?
Right.
What is there about Patton Oswalt that's not? Are you kidding?
And why do they label? When I hear his stuff, why is he alt? Because
Patton Oswalt is a comic. Any of them that you want to name, they're comic. Now the alt thing was, from what they told me, and they said they didn't do comedy in comedy clubs. They couldn't get up in comedy clubs, so they went to other venues. And that was the alt thing, that they're doing stand up in, the bookstore or something like that, which is, open mics. But it became a thing. We're going to do comedy at Largo, not at the Laugh Factory.
Got you.
Right. That was the thing. But as far as what they do, it's comedy.
If it's funny.
It's comedy. Listen, Todd Glass is a comic.
Yep.
Now, Todd may lose his mind and go into this weird act-out thing or whatever, but Todd's a comic. I love Todd.
Yeah.
He's a comic. What about him is he talks on stage and he's funny. He tells stories. He acts out moments. He's a comic. Why does that have to be different than, Tom Papa, who tells jokes? They're both comics. It's just different styles, Mm-hmm. You want alt, figure out Harlan Williams. Go into that head.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's an alt reality.
He is. If you ever watch this, that's one show when I see him on set, you really actually never know what you're
I
going to
love that guy.
It's so crazy.
It is. Yeah. You want alt? No, this is alt reality.
And I've seen it bomb. I've seen it do great, and he does not care.
Does not care.
He just goes. That's my thing. I'm getting closer. I feel to this where it's more about me just getting It's weird for me to say out loud, but I feel like once you get to a certain level, it's not even about the audience. It's about you building your craft better.
Absolutely. Because what happens is you learn, I can make the audience laugh
if you want,
and that's not coming from ego, and that's coming from I've been doing this long enough. I know, and I have a body of material that works that I can go back to. Then you get to, okay, what can I do to push myself.
Yes.
What can I do that's going to be different? You know, again, we keep talking about Titus, but he hit me up last year. He said, write 5 minutes that scares you to death. And that's when I started writing about my early drug use and recovery, which I never touched on stage, partly because it was so long ago for me, you know. And it's like, so when Jay Moore has some great stuff about recovery, Mulaney does, I'm like, yeah, but they just went to rehab like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I went in 88.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of the norm for me, you know.
Yeah.
So, but now I'm looking into that. So when I say the personal stuff, that's different for me to get into that.
Yeah, and it's a different muscle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, like I remember like I was performing at a Comedy Juice when it was big, but after the peak of it, like Jay Davis started this thing, and I was there, and Joe Coy, I was opening for him, and came to one of my shows, and 2 things I learned that night is I was in the middle, and I did fine, and then the last guy crushed, and he goes, tell me, he goes, you did great tonight. You had the best set. I go, what are you talking about? Because I did okay. He goes, because everybody in that room knows everything about you. And he goes, you started with your life. You talked about your mom, your dad, everything. So I know about you. I feel a connection with you. He goes, that last guy, yeah, he almost got a standing ovation. What's his name again? I go, I don't know. He goes, tell me something about him. I go, he's funny. He goes, yeah. And that's what people are going to say when they leave. That last guy was hilarious.
Yeah.
But they're going to remember you. You know?
And you know, that has worked for Joe.
Yeah,
that has worked for Joe tremendously. You know, I used to watch George, and I was like, man, he says his name like 5-6 times in that hour.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and again, these are the things that I'm too stupid to do, because my favorite joke's always my newest.
Yeah.
That's the one I want to do, and that's what I want to work on, and that's why I can't say I didn't make it, because again, I watched the work that they did and what I watched Dane Cook become Dane Cook. You know, we were doing Dublins every week, and that was insane, because it was like we'd come in. So Dublins, pro open mic. This is right before you came to LA, so you just heard stories.
I just heard the stories. I didn't actually experience it at all.
It was a pro open mic. It started out as a bar show with Ahmed and Jay Davis producing, and me, Dane, and why am I blanking on his name? The Rooster, Darren Carter. Would be there every
Party
week,
starter, just
working on material, working on ideas. Then it moved from this bar into Dublin's, and it became a bigger thing. Dublin's was like a scene, like it was this giant Irish hangout bar on Sunset, but we would still be there every week. Dane, it was crazy, and I knew Dane for a few years then, but it was like, where you going this week? Oh, I'm doing Chicago Improv. Oh, I'm doing Dallas Funny Bone. Oh, I'm doing blah blah blah. And 3 weeks later, where you doing? Oh, I'm doing San Jose Improv. Oh, I'm doing the Kansas City Chuckle Hut. Oh, I'm doing Madison Square Garden. What? What?
Yeah, that fast.
It was like that, you know, because Dane figured out social media before anybody.
Like Russell Peters with YouTube.
He was a big college guy, and this was when social media was blowing up in colleges. And I always say, listen, Dane built a $10,000 website when we thought the internet was for porn.
Yep.
That was all we knew about the internet, you know, so good for him. But anyway, Dublin's, we'd be there every week, and it became a scene. And, you know, the alumni of Dublin's, Dr. Ken, Craig Robinson, Ralphie May, Sebastian, just on and on. All these every week, different lineups would come in. But me, Dane, and for a long time, Darren, but me and Dane, we were always there.
And you would close the show.
I always went up after Dane. And people are like, how do you follow Dane Cook? I'm like, well, I'm not trying to be Dane Cook. See, you had all these other, and I always said, you know, people hated Dane and this. I said, no, how famous Dane was. People were doing him before he was famous. They were trying to be Dane Cook. They were trying to do that energy thing. I said, man, you imagine me jumping around on a stage, my big ass here in the front row. No, I'm not. I'm the opposite of Dane. I'm going to sit here and talk. And I had my own vibe doing that, and I loved it. It was so creative, but it was also just fun, and it was something I loved every week, you know. And so, like, now, when I watch these comics become famous doing crowd work, I thought about it, and it's one of the problems with doing it is I did it for like 3 years, 20 years ago, and I don't feel like doing it again. Like, it's hard to recreate what I had at Dublin's because it was just in that moment. Dublin's to us was the improv in New York to like Leno and Seinfeld and those 80s guys when they talk about New York in the 70s before they became, that's what Dublin's was to us.
Yeah, 100%.
And different groups have their thing. And Jay Davis, I love him. He's always tried to recreate it. And it's like, Jay, you can't recreate that because you had 10 comics who were great, ready to pop, but hadn't yet. You know what I mean? And then I won Last Comic, and, you know, Dr. Ken started the movie career that's been tremendous. And, you know, Ralphie, may rest in peace, he became Ralphie. Bobby Lee. Yep. You know, all of us, we used to just be there. And Uncle Joey.
Dude, Joey, beast.
Yeah, and that was, you know, it was a phenomenal time, but you can't recreate that.
What's the one comic you saw the first time and you're like, he gonna make it?
Fluffy. Yeah, Gabe 100%. Iglesias. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gabe, it was insane. And it wasn't the funny, it was the love of the crowd. You could feel how much the crowd loved him. You know, he had that. Yeah. He's the one. Joe surprised me, and I don't say that with any insult or diss to Joe. Joe was funny, but then Joe just like we didn't see all the work Joe was doing, and then suddenly the audience was growing and he was growing. You know what I mean? And then he became a monster. You know.
I tell you, the reason why I brought up earlier in the podcast the hate or the competitiveness. Is I remember when I first started and I told people I was touring with Joe, there was so much hate towards Joe because he sang at the end of his shows. He was a character on stage. Mm-hmm. But I told him, this is 13 years ago, 12 years ago. I go, when I leave a Joe Coy show, I don't feel I went to a comedy show. I feel like I went to an event. Mm. And now everybody's seeing that. But there was so much, he's not a real comic because he sings, he does this. Now, kind of, you do the funny. Like you said, if it's funny, it's funny.
Yeah.
So for the first year, maybe 2 years, definitely the first year, people hated Dane.
Yeah.
Hated him. And it hurt him. It bothered him. And then I talked to him about 2 years in, 3 years in, and he said, hey, man, bigger star, bigger target. You know, people resent success.
Yeah. But at the same time, when he was on my podcast, he admitted he made a lot of mistakes, too.
Well, he was, you know, his arrogance.
His arrogance.
His arrogance.
But he also said he didn't have a great family or anybody behind him at that time.
His arrogance, he burned a lot of bridges. And he's another one who I can say I've always been cool with him, right?
Yeah,
he's
me
been
too.
the same
Me too.
guy with me. But yeah, I know friends of his. I know comic friends of his that he lost. There was definitely an arrogance to it. I don't know why, but I didn't get that from him. I think because I was never competing with him.
Yeah.
You know, I never had a problem with him being who he was. The only problem I had with these guys is they never take me on the private jet.
None of them. Never been on a private jet.
None of them. Russell Peters, Dane Cook, Fluffy. Fluffy has asked me. I will say he invited me, and I couldn't because it was like 2 weeks before, and I was already booked. But yeah, they never bring me on the jet. You know, and Russell's like, man, I ain't bringing you. I don't want to work that hard. I was like, come on, Russell. I won't be funny.
I won't be funny. Just take me on the jet.
No, I joke about that. I love Russell. Russell's great. And he's a generous guy. You know, another thing about some comics that people don't realize is how generous they are. Some of the rich superstars.
And they, like, I open for Fluffy and Hassan Minaj. Mm-hmm. And we're comics. When we go in, we don't expect nothing, right? And they came here to Vegas, so I lived in town. And I remember getting a call from Fluffy and Hassan's manager, and they go, hey, what's your bank account? We want to send you a payment. And when they sent what they sent for 10 minutes of work, I was like, I can't wait to be able to do that for other people.
Yeah.
You know, because it's not like they don't cheap out at all.
No. These guys are
they know
generous.
They know what you've been through. That's what.
And they also, you know, when comics get down on their luck, comics have gotten sick, and there's a GoFundMe and this and that. And then this big check comes, you know, this big donation comes from somebody. And I know some of the comics who have done that. And it's beautiful. Yeah. And they do it because they know what it's like. You know, they know what it's like to be a comic. You know, we ain't get no health insurance in this shit.
Nope.
You know, suddenly you get hurt. You can't work for X amount of time. And they're like, yeah, man, here. You know, don't say anything, you know. It's cool.
If you don't mind me asking, talking about topical humor. So I write constantly, and Michael and I talk about this all the time. I'll write a joke, and I'm doing one right now because I'm from the same hometown as Bob Dylan, and obviously with the movie and it's out there. How do you segue jokes that are topical and put them in? You know, obviously they're going to have a shelf life on them. How do you segue them into the hour?
Well, you know when they're there, and then you know when they're gone. You know, my Kamala Harris stuff is gone.
Yeah.
Right? It's still funny, but it's gone. She's not important anymore. She's not whatever. So it's kind of a natural flow. Like there's always something new coming in and something old going out. And then there are some things that'll be evergreen in the sense that person will become relevant
again.
Yeah.
You know, and in the 90s, I had this Daryl Strawberry bit, and I was like, Daryl, you just keep bringing it back.
Right,
You just every 2 years, you're going to make me funny again.
Yeah. Like I see people doing COVID material and it's still hitting, and I'm like, how much longer is that going to have?
Some people do that, and I might make reference, like I have a joke about how much we loved COVID traffic, right? That's always going to work for people who remember it. You know? But I don't do it all the time. I don't do that all the time. So it's kind of where I'm at, what I feel like doing, what I feel like.
And what type of place
about.
you're at.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, sometimes in a red area, you want to kind of poke fun at it and get them riled up.
Oh, no,
you know?
no. I like pissing them off.
I know you do. That's why I'm saying.
I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, and that was another thing I learned. Like, you can't figure out what the audience wants. You know, a lot of comics, you don't know who they are or what they've been through. And now I'm the one thing, because people always say you're topical. What about, you know, I said, listen, when they see the blackface on the marquee, on the poster, they know I'm not a Trumper.
100%.
They ain't coming in looking for that. The middle of the road white comics, I know, a lot of them who are liberal or non-political or whatever, they catch hell because they expect you to be a Trumper.
Well, you know what's
right?
interesting?
You're a white guy and you know what we mean, and they're like, nah, man, I don't hate trans people.
I find it interesting. I know a couple of comics that were liberals, but they will go super right because they know that crowd is easy to get.
Yeah.
On their side. Like I tell my wife all the time, if I was a Republican, being half black and Asian and doing comedy, I would be selling out huge arenas, right? Not arenas, but theaters, because they would love to see a person like me support that movement. And Fox News and all those outlets, just because of how I look. You know what I mean?
Gutfeld show and all that.
Oh, it's easy money.
They came at me when Obama got elected because they were looking for a black comic to be anti-Obama.
Yep.
And I was basically like, there ain't enough money on God's earth for that. But then they found Diamond and Pearl or whatever them two idiots were. You know? You know, and I know some of the right-wing comics that it's like, some of them have gone hard right, and then others I'm like,
it's
think
fake.
You're doing it for the money.
You're doing it for the money. I know two.
You know,
that are totally just doing it for the money. Just doing it for the money.
But yeah, so I don't try to pander to them. Just like they say, you don't make fun of the left. It's like, yeah, I do. You just don't hear it.
Yeah.
You're so angry that you don't hear anything except what you want to hear. You know, listen,
but that's both sides too.
Yeah, I was saying Biden was too old 2 years ago because he was old then, and that's when he should have stepped down. You know, he'd been old for a long time.
Yeah.
But then I'll also joke that, look, you got a 78-year-old telling me the 80-year-old is too old. Come on now.
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
So
you're a great follow on Threads.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're great on Threads. I love reading your stuff. It's great.
Yeah, but it's so in answer to your question, when do I know it's right and when it's wrong? It's just, is it still funny to me? Is it still relevant? Or do I have a new joke I want to do and I only got 45 minutes?
Sure.
So sometimes, you know, it's funny when people ask me to do a joke that I don't even remember.
Yeah.
Hey, man, do your bit. And I'm like, okay, how did it go?
Right?
So I don't remember. Yeah. And then I'll be like, damn, that was funny. Yeah, I will do that again. You know?
So my last question, because I have to run and do stuff with the kids, but what?
This is fun, by the way. I talk to you all day. Man.
No, I know, and this is what next time we're going to do a lot longer. And since you live here, I would love for you to pop on all the time. Yeah. But the question I have: what reading do you do? Give me 3 things to read a day, and if I wanted to start getting into Topical and working.
So what I do is I have an app called Flipboard, and I put in different feeds, New York Times, LA Times, The Guardian, BBC, the British cover news great, Breaker Report for sports, Jalopnik is cars, BuzzFeed is great. They have their own top 10 thing.
Yeah, they got the list, yeah.
So I flip through, I look at my Flipboard, and different articles will catch my attention. So I think what today...
And also it's in tune to what you normally look at, too. It kind of like registers what you like, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So today there's so many news feeds. I think you have to pick more than one. You have to pick a number of them. Like me and Goldman used to joke about USA Today. You know, USA Today is the simple news, but they cover everything. It's very simple, very superficial, but it'll give you an idea of what people are talking about. The stories they have are stories that people are talking about. New York Times has become disappointing.
Yeah.
It used to be such a great critical thinking paper, and it's not anymore. The media is disappointing now, right? That's where the foreign media, that's where sometimes you get the BBC or some article from there.
Isn't it crazy when you go to other countries and watch their news, how unimportant America is? But when you live here, it seems like everything.
Right. Well, and it's also, I do a joke about it. Like this generation, right? The Gen Z, like they've never seen the news.
Yeah.
They've seen podcasts, and I do a joke like, used to be there was an old white man at the end of the day, and he said, "Hear now the news." And that was it. This is the news.
And everybody be like, that's the news.
There was no profit in it. See, and the people who are real journalists, because I used to do shows all the time for the LA Press Club, and they said, listen, once you put profit in, they have to get likes.
Yep.
How can you write the news when you have to get likes?
Yep.
You can't be critical of blah, 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 And it's like today, I was watching the news. I'm trying to keep up with the fires. LA is on fire. The second largest city in America is on fire. And you're going to debate Trump wanting to say the Gulf of America. Like, we ain't got time for that nonsense.
Yeah.
That's utter nonsense.
Well, news has become, real news has become celebrity news.
Yeah.
It's become just clickbaity. Because I remember an anchor made fun of me from the real news, made fun of when I worked for E! He goes, oh, y'all just silly news. And I go, well, that's how you're presenting real news now.
Well, they call it silly news, but now they get their breaking stories from TMZ.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
All right, Alonzo, we got to let you go. Do you have anything to promote?
Well, I don't know when you're going to be airing
this. This is
first week of February.
First week of February.
I will be at sea doing jazz cruises, which we haven't even gotten into how much I love. You want to talk about creativity? I get to work with the greatest musicians in the world. I get to work with jazz musicians. There is no group of people more creative. And they're kind of like us in that a lot of them, they play in, like, for instance, like Marcus Miller, great friend of mine who I absolutely love, did all of the music for Luther Vandross. That paid the rent, bought the house, this or that. Meanwhile, he was in a band with Miles Davis, writing for Miles and doing his own, this beautiful, brilliant jazz, right? And then he scores movies and stuff. But, so they're the same in the sense it's like having a sitcom, but being able to do alt comedy, because that's what you really love doing. It's like, and a lot of these jazz musicians, Robert Glasper, this guy's everywhere doing all kind of brilliant stuff. Every February I do these 4 jazz cruises, and I'm surrounded by the most creative people and the most open audience, grown folks who are smart and love creativity. When this airs, I'll be doing that.
Amazing.
Love it.
Hey, man, well, I appreciate you live right down the road. I appreciate you popping by. Let's do it again.
Hit me up. I'm going to get back on a Wednesday. That's one thing about being here, man. You got these regular gigs. It's too easy to stay home.
Oh, man. But but the real money is not here.
Yeah.
It's on the road. It's on the road.
But it's not even about the money, though. It's those spots that I used to do every week at the Laugh Factory and Improv that I would just write new stuff and go down there and work on it. But here it's kind of booked by the week and it's this and that. So
it's a different world.
I haven't found that spot. I'll find some place to do that. But it's all good. It's all good. But I appreciate you.
Well, every Wednesday it could be your spot. Whatever. Yeah. We there. All
right, man. I appreciate you.
All right, Alonzo Bodden on the podcast. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, that like button, and also watch my brand new special. It's right here or right there. It's somewhere. Rudy put it somewhere. Snack Daddy. It's out right now. Watch it. Thank you. Have a good day. Later.